Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin James from Scalp Micropigmentation Australia, and welcome to another 5-minute fast facts on scalp micropigmentation, the Pro Artist series, where we're interviewing some amazing scalp micropigmentation artists from around the world, getting their tips and tricks on how you can get the most out of your scalp micropigmentation transformation. Today we're talking to an SMP artist from London in the UK. He's been performing scalp micropigmentation for just over 3 years. He has extensive experience in combining scalp micropigmentation treatments with hair transplant results and enjoys helping many men just like himself that followed down the hair transplant and SMP path. He was nominated for Rising Star Award in 2019 as he was recognised by his peers for being exceptionally skilled at his art for an artist that has been in the industry less than 2 years. And as I mentioned before, he is now heading just over 3 years in the industry. Today we're going to welcome to the show Mr. Jatty Grewal. How are you, Jay?
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for having me on. I'm good, thank you.
No worries. So glad you could join us. Perfect. Well, let's start with a little bit about yourself and your own hair loss experience. So just tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to have a transplant followed by scalp micropigmentation.
Right. So my hair loss journey, what a journey that was, right? From a very young age, due to various hairstyles, there's a lot of traction, and I was just generally dealing with like a receding hairline from a very young age. I'll say from about 22. Mm-hmm. So obviously using the concealer as a topic, it was just controlling my life. And just over 10 years ago, the most common solution out there was a hair transplant. And FUE hair transplants were just like a kind of new invention around then. So I went in for a hair transplant, and and the doctor did mention, hey, you're 23, you want a hairline that's quite low. By the time you turn 30, you're probably going to be like a Norwood 6, Norwood 7. And I was just like, it's not an option for me. I just want it, if it's a short fix, it's a short fix. Let's just get it done, right? So anyways, went for the hair transplant at the age of about 23, tender age of 23. But obviously, the doctor was very honest with me. He's like, you're very young. You will receive more, and your scale of hair loss is quite drastic. It's not, So went for the hair transplant, got 2,000 grafts, and I had a hairline of this. So obviously this hair was kind of receding. I was probably like a Norwood 2, right? So obviously that all went well. I held on to that for about 4 or 5 years, and then obviously I had a problem where I had hair towards the front. Either I was to go for another hair transplant, which obviously limits your donor area, or either it's to buzz it off and get scalp micropigmentation done. Yeah. So that was my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm sure, I know in my own location, it's a very common story that you've just told. They start off at a younger age enhancing the hairline, which is great. It gets them through that stage of their life that it's really important to feel youthful and feel confident in your appearance. But then when the natural hair does end up moving away from the transplant, they're left with either 2 hairlines, if they haven't been on hair loss medication for stabilization, or the hair that's started to move away in the area then thins out, all of the transplants as they remain, and the natural hair continues on its hair loss path. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, what are your thoughts on combining treatments of scalp micropigmentation and transplants then?
That's a really good question. Because you have a lot of guys who are like, these transplants don't work. Absolutely. FUE hair transplants are they're an excellent method of hair loss, right? But the problem with transplants, and you need to be a good candidate, and your expectations need to be realistic. So what we've done in the past is working with 2 world-renowned hair transplant surgeons, right? And I work very closely with them. What we've done is we've kind of had low density FUE hair transplant. So if you're like a Norwood 7, you just have like a scatter of hair, which isn't too dense. So it kind of gives you that texture. And then 5 to 6 months later, we just obviously build that up with the actual scalp micropigmentation procedures, and layer that in, and it gives them a good full effect. And I think that look, it just suits the S&P, and it gives it texture, and it makes it look so much more realistic as well. And I think in general, a lot of the younger guys, I mean, as you just mentioned, I've had like a 19-year-old normal 7, and I think just due to evolution, I think the younger guys are actually losing the hair so much more quicker at a faster rate, just like probably even faster than myself, So I think combining them in the future, that is definitely a great outlook for scalp micropigmentation.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on, or do you feel like every person that has a transplant could benefit from the use of scalp micropigmentation? So for long hair versus, maybe a more mature person that really has just got super low density now of transplants. Do you feel like everyone that has a transplant is a candidate for scalp micropigmentation?
I feel so. And, it's the reason why, a lot of transplant clinics around the world are now offering scalp micropigmentation, because to a degree it can help. But as a practitioner, you probably find it yourself, we've got to say, hey, you've got to buzz it off. I know you've had 2 transplants. One potentially would have failed or whatever, but I think you just need to take the plunge and buzz it off for a better result. So you've got to be quite honest, because when you've got less than, I'd say, about 60% density on the top of the scalp, you've got to buzz it off. But obviously with transplanted, clients that have had a hair transplant and they've got sufficient density, depending on how good the surgery was done, that hair will pretty much be permanent, right? So as a practitioner, we know that hair will be there pretty much for a very long time, if not forever, right? So it gives us that kind of confident flexibility to just go in and treat that client. So to a degree, absolutely.
Yeah, because I find that even with the guys that have had transplants and they do have low density, sometimes they're a good candidate for using beard trimmer lengths, so that you do see the benefit of the transplants, like you mentioned before, how your surgeons are scattering over a Nord 7 with grafts, so they do have that texture, a little bit of 3D of their own hair enhanced with the scalp micropigmentation. It can be a different look to actually shaving down fully with a blade. So if there is a light coverage over there, like there still is a very nice benefit for the transplants to be there, for sure.
Yeah, and also with beard hair as well, because if you're keeping your hair, because of the texture of this hair, obviously it's a bit more short, right? So if you're trimming it quite short, and you want to kind of give it that 0.5 stubble look, which looks hyper realistic, that could be a good option as well if you're running out of grafts.
Yeah, absolutely. The beard hair transplant or body hair transplant, they can take hair from other parts of the body. Obviously, donor area at the back of the scalp is always the favorite because it's a very active hair versus body hair. But, if the donor area is exhausted, there are other options. So through your experience, who do you feel isn't a good candidate for a hair transplant procedure?
Whoever has really high expectations. You can't just walk in and walk out of the clinic with a full head of hair. So you've got to be realistic. It's a hair transplant, right? So you've got to take the root from the back of the head to the front, right? So that's a transplant, right? So let's be realistic. If you're a Nord 6, Nord 7, I got blue in the face telling clients, hey, you'd rather get the scalp micropigmentation procedure, but their argument is they could probably get a transplant for the same price if they're traveling abroad. But you make a good candidate only if if you're slightly receding, or if you're happy with the low density FUE hair transplant, if you're a Nord 7. So your expectations need to be realistic, and maybe get some advice from a few different doctors rather than just going to the one clinic. I think also clients with Afro-Caribbean hair, I'm yet to see a successful Afro-Caribbean guy with a successful hair transplant. There's a few handful of doctors that have specialized in this technique, but extracting the Afro hair from the back of the head.
Yeah, because it curls under the surface of the skin. It's very difficult.
and obviously implanting that in. So sometimes they use really big punches or whatever. So, you know, if it's in small areas, obviously I've seen some successful ones, but if it's like a big, like a normal 3 or 4 or above, yeah, then you probably need to rethink your options. But yeah, your expectations need to be realistic.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your honest advice today. I'm sure something that you've had to say today, you know, someone's going to find useful who's looking into weighing up the options of transplant versus scalp micropigmentation or combining the two. So thank you so much for being on our 5-minute fast facts on scalp micropigmentation, the Pro Artist series. Would you like to give your business a little bit of a boost? Tell people where they can find you. Whereabouts in London are you?
Yes, yeah, sure, Caitlin. We're based in West London, a location in Chiswick, West London. And yeah, I mean, we're in part of a hair transplant, so we work in part with some hair transplant doctors. And yeah, I mean, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook under ELIXIR Micropigmentation. And if you've got any questions, do fire us a DM and we'll get back to you.
Thank you, and you will find his details below this clip as well. So if you'd like to get in touch with Jay, make sure you head into the comment area or the description below so that you can have a look at his business details. And if you have any comments or questions, we want to hear from you. So as always, don't be shy, give us a call or an email, pop something in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so that you stay up to date with the latest content as it's released. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you.